Rivals to Lovers, Part 2. I tried to ignore it, but it was in vain. I announced my birthday plans to both Elias and Casper. At first, things seemed to go well between the two. Or at least, they weren't as bad as I assumed things between Elias and me. And honestly, the minute change wasn't even that obvious. But I had known Casper for over a year now, and if there was something I could tell about him without a doubt, it was his changing moods. Soon after the little meeting in the changing room, Elias left us alone. He said he had some urgent things to take care of, and then waved us goodbye, before either of us could utter a word. But that was fine. If things were to go from bad to worse between Elias and me, I was prepared for that. After all, we had spent nearly a year insulting each other to the moon and back. When Elias left, I turned to Casper, and strangely, he seemed stiff. This was not a new look on him, but I couldn't help but think this was because of me. And considering what I had just confessed not even half an hour ago, it was most definitely because of me. I turned to him. "Hey, you alright?" "Yeah," he answered and shoved his hands in his hoodie. By the tone of his voice, I knew that was a lie. "Do you want to go home?" "What if we stop by the cafe?" I was sure his favorite cafe would cheer him up. "Nah, I'm really not in the mood." "Okay," I said, and grabbed my bag from one of the benches. When Casper didn't say anything and simply walked out, I followed him. I knew he was upset, but I didn't know if it was the right time to discuss anything with him. During these moments when he was upset, he preferred opening up at his own pace, and I wasn't going to challenge that when I knew things were a little sensitive here. "Would you like to come over? Dad's making dinner." "I like his cooking," he muttered. "Yeah, so you coming?" "Can I?" he asked. "Obviously you can, Casper. You know what? Have a sleepover at my place." "Really?" He was getting back his color. I eagerly nodded at him and wrung our hands together. If staying with me cheered him up, I was not going to let him down. But apparently things weren't going to be the same after my star-studded confession to both of them, just 2 days ago. But I did not seem to realize any of that right away. No, I took my sweet time. And the more I took, the less I could control everything around me. Looking back at it, I realized the first moment was on my birthday. After spending some hours with my parents and cutting cake with them, I waited for Casper and Elias exactly where I'd asked them. But the moment they reached, and I was still surprised, they started arguing. Now that was even more surprising, given the fact that Elias and Casper never really had the opportunity or interaction to actually talk, much less argue. I was their mutual denominator. If they had ever interacted, chances were that they must have been because of me. But the more they shriveled in the presence of each other, the more I realized the weight of my confession was heavier on them than what I had initially thought. And the more they argued, the more I felt ashamed. What had I done? I was not in some fancy rom-com where I was sure to end with the two of the most handsome guys in my uni. If one were to sit down and examine my situation, they would probably find faults in the way I was dealing with the situation and question if I actually felt attracted to either of the two guys. After all, if I liked even one seriously, why would I aim to look for another? Thankfully, I spared myself from that trouble. It was my birthday and I wasn't ready to deal with that crisis yet. It was a miracle in itself that Elias had accepted my offer to come to my birthday. This was the first time. "Guys," I told them, "what if we go to a restaurant instead?" "We can order desserts," Elias agreed, "to celebrate your birthday." "Yes," I said. I turned to Casper, and I asked him if he had any objections. "I have an objection with him being there, but I do not think restaurants are the best place to celebrate your birthday. I suggest we go to the cafe." I felt a little awkward when I responded, "Casper, but it's a cafe. We still need a proper dinner." I raised my hands before he could say something else. "How about we go on a ride? Long drive, after the restaurant." Casper loved long drives. "I have my car with me," Elias agreed and leaned against his car. We both looked at Casper for his confirmation. Where are you going to sit?" he asked me. I blinked. "In the front?" "And I'm not letting you drive," Elias informed Casper. I could feel an oncoming headache. "Could sit in the back," I suggested. "I'm not your driver, Will," Elias said, and rightfully so. It was his car, and we weren't his customers for the day. "Not letting Will sit by you," Casper argued. "You know what?" Elias said finally. "I'm not going to come between you two. In fact, I shouldn't even have been here." He stopped and opened his car door. He grabbed a birthday bag from it and handed it to me. "Maybe I can bring you a cake tomorrow or something. Sorry. Here's your birthday gift. And I hope you two have a great time together. Thank you for thinking of me." He got into his car and drove away. The silence after he left felt like a burden on my shoulders. I couldn't believe this had happened. Sure, the chance of a peaceful evening was slim, but I'd never imagined it would be like this. I hadn't imagined Casper would be so hostile. He did not seem as mean when we first talked about it. But then again, perhaps he didn't thought that I would actually confess my feelings to Elias. See, this happened when humans lived in fantasies. Hollywood was a big fat lie, and I wasn't going to watch another rom-com again. I turned to Casper, and he didn't really look as guilty as I imagined him to be. In fact, he didn't even look like he cared about what he had done. Although I was upset, I did not want to push him anymore, so I let him have this. "How about we go to the restaurant now, and then take a long drive?" he asked. Yes, I agreed with a slight smile. The gift bag felt heavy in my hands. I wasn't sure why, but I expected a simple sorry from him. But I felt so guilty about the situation I had put us in that I didn't even want to ask for it. If Casper felt like it, he would say it. The dinner was mostly silent, and so was the 1-hour drive. It was the first time with him that I didn't have the energy to actually talk. Sure, we did gossip a little, and we did giggle and laugh, but something still felt heavy between us. Weirdly, whenever I felt Casper's eyes on me, I didn't think it was because of that cute old crush thing. I knew what it was, but I didn't have the courage to point at it, even in my silence. So silently, I decided to ignore it. When he dropped me at my place and kissed me goodnight, I swear it was the first time I did not feel that sparkle between us. I still smiled at him and wrapped my arms around his shoulders when he kissed me again, but I couldn't lie to myself. Casper had hurt me. At night, I tossed and turned on my bed and imagined how different it would have been had Elias and I not been paired up together, or I hadn't taken care of Elias when he fell sick. Surely things would have been different. But then again, I couldn't exactly look past the little moments we had shared before the trip. Like that one time when I had badly hurt my knee during a rehearsal. He had picked me up in his arms to take me to the nurse. It was a little awkward between us after that, but that dissolved only when he had claimed that I had Cinderella syndrome, and that I liked seeking his attention. Unfortunately, I had only blushed a deep red of shame and sputtered some unintelligible words. Oh God, I used to be so embarrassing. I groaned and slept with the shame still lingering on my cheeks. I was at Casper's swimming tryouts when I first received Elias's message on Instagram. He had even followed me, and that was a surprise. I was the only person in the entire team he hadn't been following. Things sure seemed to change. He asked if I liked his gifts. I immediately touched my ears and smiled when I felt the earrings. Elias had gifted me 2 studs and dangles, each branded. I knew it was surprising indeed that he had noticed that. Yes, I responded back and clicked a picture to send it to him. I followed him back. Casper swam across the pool to me and asked who I was talking to. When I asked how he could tell, he pointed at my cheeks. When I touched them, they were a little heated. Immediately, Casper's look changed, but he seemed to control his expression pretty well, nonetheless. It's Elias. He asked if I liked his gift. Did you like mine? He asked. I ran a finger from his forehead to his nose and then tapped his mouth. I did. Casper had gifted me some expensive cookies and an anklet. It was a slim, wiry thing. It looked simple but sophisticated. I couldn't say how much it must have cost him, but I knew it wasn't cheap. I loved it, I told him. When he asked me to show it to him, I pulled my trousers up my legs and showed him my ankle. He hummed and ran his finger across the pretty thing. Really compliments your skin, he said. Obviously it does. You know me, the best after all. He smiled and then kissed me. He didn't seem to want to let me go. However, when the whistle resonated in the huge hall, he regretfully smiled and pulled away. Would you like to come with me today to my home? Unfortunately, I'll have to say no. I got practice in the evening. How about tomorrow? He pulled back a little when his coach roared a warning from the other end of the pool. Maybe tomorrow. I'm booked for the entire week, Casper. He tisked, but nodded his head. Practice was important, so he didn't fuss a lot about it. He promised that if he got the time, he would come to see me. I promised the same to him. An hour later, I waved him by and casually strolled my way to the football stadium. In the changing room, as I changed, one of my teammates commented about my earrings. I smiled at him and told him it was a gift. Immediately, I found Elias's eyes. But he had his eyes on something else. When I followed it, I found him staring at my right ankle. The same one in which I was wearing Casper's anklet. I pulled a sock over it. When I looked up, Elias was staring ahead at the wall. I wondered if he felt just as bothered as Casper seemed. Between the practice, the coach gave us a 10-minute break. He clapped his hands and patted each one of us on our backs before informing us, for the second time, that we'd better be back on the field in 10 minutes. Although our coach wasn't as strict as the swimming teams, we knew not to cross him. It was the best for the team. So dutifully, we nodded at him and sat down on the bleachers to take heavy breaths. Elias sat down beside me. "Earrings suit you well," he commented. "Thanks," I said, and grinned, and then touched the studs in my ears. It had taken a lot of begging from me for my parents to agree on this. It was my hard work. If it didn't look good, I would have slapped myself to sleep. "Your choice is really nice," and my dad complimented them. "Oh," he said, and rubbed his nape, surprisingly shyly. In the last 1 year, I had never seen him acting like that. By the strange look one of the teammates passed him, I knew none of us had. He cleared his throat in embarrassment. "Long time ago, there was this girl that I really liked," he began suddenly. "She loved dressing up a lot, so she kind of taught me how to choose the best. Although our breakup was ugly, I'm glad she's still helpful to me." I chuckled a little. "Thanks to your ex-girlfriend, then." Right before our coach called, he looked down at my feet, strapped in my shoes, and said the thing I was sure I had never expected him to say. "Anklets suit you a lot, too." I'd seen my ex wearing it all the time, but he stopped and I swallowed. It was almost as if I felt nervous on his behalf. He had some red on his cheeks, but overall, he still looked confident and handsome. I didn't think they'd look so nice on a guy, too. Then came our coach's whistle, and he practically ran away from there with a tail tucked between his legs. One of my teammates snorted behind me. I turned to him. Didn't know the quarterback had it in him. Makes sense why the coach thinks he's a good leader. "Oi," I said. Elias really was an important member of our team, but the coach considered me a good captain, too. Heck, he often called me to discuss stuff with him before the tournaments. He called me a good strategist, and never forgot to pat my back and remind me that he was glad I was part of the team. I showed my teammate a middle finger and then followed the other players. The hit on my head was deserved, honestly. The practice ran until 9 in the evening, and sometimes 9:30 depending on the coach's level of satisfaction with the day's practice. Since it ran a whole week, Elias asked if he could drop me. He said he would do that only if I wanted that. After the practices in the evening, I never really had the energy to wait for the bus anyway, so it was an easy answer. Elias turned on the radio and sang along to it. It was some French song, I believed. Elias corrected me and said it was Spanish. "Eh?" I said, a little surprised. How could I not distinguish between French and Spanish? "Maybe you're just tired," he said and whistled along. "Uh-huh, maybe," I sighed, and leaned against the seat. Now that I thought about it, I was feeling exhausted and sleepy. I could even feel a subtle pain in my veins and bones. My limbs were aching. I realized especially that one particular spot in my right sole. I didn't know my future in sports, but I knew I was going to be left with some serious injuries because of this. Someday I had heard of dancers who danced so much that they hurt themselves. I didn't want to be one of them. "Do you have some water?" "Yes," he answered. "Check in my bag." I did, and when I found the bottle, I gulped it down, and again, I felt that pain in my soul. I cringed a little and perhaps moaned a little in pain too. Elias turned to me and gave me a worried look. "You're not dying, right? I haven't even kissed you yet." "Haha, very funny," I replied, even though I burned with shame and excitement at the thought of finally kissing him. "But I think there's something wrong with my right foot." "Wait, let's see." He parked his car and asked me to remove my right shoe. I did. I pulled the sock off it and tried to look at the sole of it in the cramped space. Obviously, that was a difficult task. Elias sighed and grabbed my ankle, and his finger lingered on my anklet and pulled away to properly look at it. "Oh," he said. "Yeah, there's a wound here. I have to clean it in case it gets bad." "Aw, shit, man. What the hell?" I moaned. I didn't know the pain was coming from the wound. No wonder my entire right leg was hurting. "You can drive me home quickly then. I will inform Mom and she will... I'll have a first aid kit in the car. Wait." He dropped my leg on his lap, a movement that both confused and made me nervous for various reasons, and looked for his first aid kit. One of his hands was still on my anklet. I swallowed. Why had I spent a year convincing myself Aaliyah was a dumpster of a human being? How was it possible for a person to lie so much and convince others around him that the person they resented was actually the worst human that walked the earth when in actuality, he wasn't? Seeing him acting so careful reminded me of all the times he had helped the other team members with their needs. Why had I so casually overlooked everything? Oh my god, I bemoaned everything now. As he carefully cleaned my soul after cleaning it with water, a move that sure as hell dirtied his hands, I couldn't help but admire him for his little distance. He was such a handsome guy, I thought to myself. He had the kind of face that made sense in a drama, just like Casper's from a distance. They would look like brothers, but still with their unique features. It's all good, he said, and placed everything back in their places. He turned a little to wash his hands with my legs still in his lap, and then wiped them with napkins. I watched him do it all with rapt attention. This man was so nice. Why did I waste my time on hating him? I had only left less than 2 years with him, and then life was surely going to take us in different ways. I wondered if he'd like me in his life by then. When I pulled my leg from his lap, he stuttered and blushed. A rare look on him. Sorry, didn't notice, he said, and wiped his hands with napkins again. Thanks, I muttered, and rubbed my right foot. I would have to hop home. It was a shame Elias was going to see me like that. My self-respect was surely facing immense shame. Didn't know you knew so much about this stuff. What he did was basic stuff, but I still felt like complimenting him and letting him know how much I appreciated it. He had done the same after that trip. My dad and brother are in medicine. They taught me all this stuff. Besides, I realized being a sportsman meant that we should at least have basic knowledge about the treatment and care. The basic things. That's cool, I said. Yeah, he replied. Silence crept in on us then. It came from all sides. He tapped his finger on the steering wheel and then asked if I was ready to go home. I nodded at him, and we started driving again. Thankfully, when we reached my home, instead of letting me walk on my own with my bag, he got out of the car, held me around my waist, and then helped me to the door. And I suppose something happened then. Because when he suddenly asked if he could kiss me, instead of replying, I kissed him first. Thus, right in front of my home, where I was sure my parents could see me kissing a guy who wasn't Casper, I kissed Elias for the first time. When he pulled back, he said, "Your nose is so red, you look like Santa." I gently slapped his cheek. I had no verbal insult to return. Instead of saying anything else, he leaned in again to kiss me. And even though I didn't see it, I knew one of my parents was looking at us with some puzzlement. How I was going to explain this to them was a future problem, because kissing Elias felt really good. The next day, Casper asked about my foot. I told him about everything, and he nodded gravely. Just like Elias, he held my foot and looked at the sole. It's a nasty wound. How did you not notice? Well, duh, I was wondering the same. So he dropped you, huh? There it was, that shifted him. Casper, it was the only solution. We left uni late, and I didn't have the energy in me to take a bus. Yeah, I got it. Why is there a wound on your lip, though? He pointed to his own bottom lip. It's very small, but it's there, at the corner. Ah, that? I touched my bottom lip. I swallowed. I remembered a feeling, a pinch last night, when I was kissing Elias. This had come from there. I felt guilty looking at Casper, even though we weren't dating. Oh, he said wryly, you kissed him. It happened suddenly, Casper. I hadn't planned on that. Sure you hadn't, but we cannot say anything about him. I swallowed. I don't think you planned that either, Casper. It's all right. It's all right because you like him, he hissed. His expression changed slightly and became something mean. I understood where his anger originated from, but I couldn't understand the reaction. Since that day in the changing, Casper had refused to talk about it, no matter how many times I tried to broach the subject, and now he was acting rudely. I can't believe this. He got up from the bleachers to leave. I grabbed his hand and looked at him desperately. As stupid as the confession might have been, Casper was still a good friend of mine, and I didn't want to lose him over some stupid feelings. Oh, Casper, please don't be angry. I kissed him only because you said it was all right with you if I checked out the things first. I'm sorry if the kiss hurt you. I said that because I wanted to look supportive, Will. I didn't actually mean it. What kind of boyfriend wants their partner to go and kiss another man to check things first? You're mocking this relationship. Neither were we boyfriends nor were we in a relationship. We kissed and slept together, sure, but mostly because we had a mutual crush on each other, and I didn't really have anyone else that we liked, at least in this case. I'm sorry, I balked, still in shock, but I nodded in understanding. Casper was right. There was no way to confirm that what I felt for Elias was not merely a fleeting crush, at most. It might as well be a fascination, and I didn't want to risk my friendship with Casper over it. After all, I still liked him. Please tell me what to do. If you want me to stay away from him, I will. Don't be angry, Casper. He huffed and sat down. 2 minutes later, he was back to his old self. I'm sorry I acted that way, but, Will, as much as I don't want to control you, I don't want you to stay with him either. Stay away from him. Okay, I said and shriveled, a little from within. I can do that. Thanks, Casper smiled. But weirdly, his smile did not reach his eyes. I was at another one of Casper's practices when Elias messaged me. It was very simple, but I understood the emotion behind it. He had sent Will? I had stood him up. Elias and I had planned to hang out 3 days ago. He suggested we watch a horror movie in 3D. Recently, good horror movies had come out, and we agreed it would be fun to watch them in the cinema. When I informed Casper about it, he got a little mean and defensive. I suggested all three of us could go together. Casper reluctantly agreed, and I informed Elias about it. He promised to buy 3 tickets. When the day finally arrived, Casper, very similarly, like he had done on my birthday, said he didn't want to watch a movie with me in Elias's presence. I reminded him that it was an old plan, so we couldn't exactly change it, but he refused to come, and said I could go if I wanted to. But when I angrily got ready to leave, he got a little mean and defensive. At the end of it, we didn't go. As much as this change in him was baffling, I couldn't really stop him from kissing me. When we got intimate, I couldn't help but think how Elias must be waiting for us, especially me in this cold. I'd forgotten to message him. And now he was upset, and rightfully so. I ignored his message and looked at Casper looking alive in the pool. I sighed and kept staring at him until my eyes blurred, and I felt warm tears on my cheeks. Scared, I immediately ran out of there, and to the washrooms to lock myself in one of the stalls. What had I done? I sobbed. First, there was the sudden feeling for Elias, then the sudden change in Casper. In the span of a few weeks, so much had happened. It was not impossible to accept that it all started from me. But more than anything, it was hard for me to accept that Casper had changed so much that it was hard to feel anything but upset at him. I could still recall that sweet man who had a sweet crush on me, and how simple and natural it seemed to be with him. Was it really true? Did people in Casper's position really grow controlling and mean without them knowing? Did Casper know? I cannot come tomorrow. I have classes and then practice, I informed Casper, as we came out of the auditorium and walked towards his parked car. Oh no, why don't you ditch the practice? Ditch my practice to watch you practice? I asked. It was a joke, don't take it seriously, he said, and unlocked his car. I just don't like seeing you near him. I turned to him, and he brought his hand to rub my cheek. Jesus, I didn't know I hated him more than you do. I don't hate him. I was dumb not to realize that, I corrected. Yeah, right. He pulled his hand away. Let's go now. At the same moment, I heard Elias calling my name. I turned to find Elias huffing and puffing before he asked why I had done what I had. He was talking about the movie night. I waited more than an hour. Will, you told me we will have something to eat before going to the cinema, and I brought the stuff. I waited for you, both of you, and you never showed up. You didn't even have the decency to message me, once. I'm sorry, Elias. I didn't get the time. I didn't know what else to answer. Casper was right behind me, and I didn't want to say anything to hurt him. You didn't get the time? Elias repeated. It's been 3 days, Will. Before I could answer, Casper came between us and shoved at Elias' shoulder a little. Back off, man. You don't have to be so overbearing. It was in the past. I'm not being overbearing, Elias answered. And I know it was because of you. You did that on his birthday, and you did that on the other plans we made. And then you did it for this one as well. And I know it's not him, but you. Well, Casper said, and I could hear him clenching his teeth. What does that mean? You cannot claim to like him when you control him so much. And well, that was a valid response. I had thought of that several times, but I didn't have the courage to accept it in fear of Casper's responses. The guilt that Casper would not have felt this way, had it not been for my confession, weighed heavily on my shoulders each time Casper didn't seem like himself. But Casper didn't seem to think that as a valid response. In fact, before Elias could let out another word, Casper snapped at him and punched him. He didn't do anything after that, but I remained still and shocked. What had just happened? Casper breathed heavily, probably feeling guilty. He had never done this before, and I knew he wasn't a violent person by nature. As afraid as I felt, I couldn't help but place a trembling hand over his shoulder. Casper, I said, why did you do that? Elias, for his part, didn't get off the ground. Are you going to hit him in the same way if he doesn't agree with your demands? No, Casper said. I will never hurt him. And though he sounded uncertain of himself, believed him. He might have said and done some mean things in the past, but he wasn't violent by nature. I was sure he was feeling ashamed and guilty of having hurt Elias like this. It's all because of you, he suddenly said and turned to me. Casper, I said, wondering what he meant by that. It's all because of that stupid confession. I saw you struggling to stand by that man for over a year, and suddenly you come to me and tell me that maybe you never hated him after all? That maybe you liked him and wanted to be his friend, or maybe kiss him all this time? Sorry, I said for the nth time. I didn't know what else to say. I think I was upset because I slowly saw you slipping by my fingers, Casper continued. I had just had you, and there you were, talking about liking another guy. Obviously, I tried to stop it and did some stupid things to do that. Heck, I even ruined your birthday, Will. Don't think I didn't notice how sad you looked the entire evening. He rubbed a hand over his face. I couldn't sleep that whole night out of guilt, but I didn't have the courage to accept my mistake either. Even then, I thought, well, at least that guy won't return your feelings, because what were the chances he would? But then I saw him hovering around you and being so natural about it. It was almost like seeing myself, and it's only going to get worse from now on. I'm so sorry, Casper. I like you, though. Yeah, and you'll get over it. He walked to his car. Well, even then, I will try to work on my personality, because sure as hell, no guy deserves an insecure boyfriend like me. I didn't even know it was possible for me to get so mean and controlling. Casper, please, I wasn't sure what I wanted to say. Still want to be your friend, Will. I don't want to become a bad version of myself, he grinned. However, I hope until you guys become official, we can kiss, though. I like kissing you. Then, without another word, he drove off. In the silence, I couldn't help but look at Elias with some curiosity. He was constantly sighing and rubbing his face. He was still on the floor and looking down at his lap. So, he said finally, and rubbed his hands over his thighs. Want someone to take you home? I nodded, yes. Then he got up and stalked his way to me. I really didn't know I'd ever see this day, he said, and then kissed me. Weirdly, I still wanted to kiss him back, and I did. After that, there was nothing left for Elias and me to do but work on this relationship. The dynamics had changed within weeks, and it was now our work to make sure it stayed functional. After that day, Casper seemed and acted a little awkward around me. Given his outburst that day, it was still nice being with him. We did not kiss, sure, but we did frequent his favorite cafe after practices. When we walked into the cafe, I turned to him. Oops, I said. The lights are up. He huffed, rolled his eyes, and grabbed my hand, and pulled me so that I could touch the fairy lights. A few inches too tall, he said. Few inches too tall, I agreed. The coach had given us, Elias and I, extra hours for practice after the official practice because he complained that we were getting too unmanageable on the ground. I huffed. It was one miss, I merely repeated to him. It wasn't that serious. But Elias reminded me that we still couldn't take a risk, and that was how we returned to our practice. After it was over 2 hours later, and around 10 o'clock, he grabbed my hand and dragged me to the parking area. Come on, it was your fault. If you'd paid a little attention on the field, we wouldn't have to do that. I bemoaned, that mistake. You don't need to be so mean about it, I said. I'm just reminding you whose fault it was. Yeah, whatever, I rolled my eyes. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me close to himself. I could smell his citrusy smell. I kind of wanted to sleep with him. Just sleep, nothing else. Come here, he said, and leaned down to kiss me. And I really wanted to kiss him back, so I did just that. The end. Are you on Team Elias or Team Casper? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.